Why is it that the more you give, the less you are valued? You reply to their messages within seconds. You reorganize your entire day just to fit their schedule. You offer your care, your warmth, and your constant availability on a silver platter. Yet, instead of pulling them closer, you can feel them slipping away. It defies logic. In every other aspect of life, effort equals reward. But in the fragile mechanics of human psychology, affection follows the laws of economics, not labor. When supply is infinite, value drops to zero. The human mind is biologically hardwired to ignore what is guaranteed and obsess over what is scarce. You have been told that being present is a virtue, but psychological reality proves that your constant presence is exactly what is making you invisible. Today, we peel back the layers of human desire to understand the hidden mechanics of the scarcity paradox, and why the most powerful move you can make is to step backward. Point 1. The destructive nature of emotional neediness. Human interaction is governed by an invisible tether of emotional gravity. When you operate from a place of high availability, you inadvertently send a subtle yet destructive frequency through this tether. This frequency is what psychologists call neediness. Neediness is not just an action. It is an existential announcement that your internal ecosystem is banked and you are relying on an external entity to bail you out. To comprehend why this kills attraction instantly, we must look at the framework of attachment theory, pioneered by British psychologist John Bowlby. Human beings possess an attachment behavioral system designed to maintain proximity to significant others. However, when one individual displays excessive anxiety and an insatiable demand for validation, it triggers a profound psychological alarm in the other. This dynamic mirrors the classic anxious avoidant trap. The anxious pursuer operates under the illusion that more contact will yield more security. But in reality, the human psyche possesses an innate psychological immune system. When someone bams chat or clings too tightly to us, our instinct is not appreciation, it is suffocation. Consider the evolutionary perspective. For thousands of years, an individual who was desperate for acceptance from a single member of the tribe signaled a lack of survival viability. Total availability implies that you have no other options, no other tribes to visit, no resources to gather, and no intrinsic goals to pursue. Your life appears empty, and you are asking the other person to fill that emptiness. This burdens them with an immense unspoken responsibility. They no longer see you as a partner or an equal value entity. They see you as an emotional liability. You are no longer an exciting territory to explore, but a heavy anchor they must drag along. The moment a person realizes that your emotional survival depends entirely on their response, the thrill of the chase evaporates. They no longer feel a desire to win your attention because it has already been surrendered unconditionally. Point 2. Detachment as the anchor of unconducive confidence. True confidence is frequently misunderstood in modern society. It is often depicted as a loud, assertive force or an exhibition of superficial validation. But true psychological confidence is silent, and its foundation rests upon a single profound concept: emotional detachment. Detachment does not mean a lack of care or descent into cold apathy. Rather, it means the complete emancipation of your self-worth from external outcomes. It is the internal realization that your value is an absolute constant, entirely independent of whether another person chooses to validate it, ignore it, or reject it. When you practice detachment, you fundamentally alter the power dynamic within any human relationship. In social psychology, this is tied closely to the principle of least interest, a theory introduced by sociologist Willard Waller. The principle states that the individual who is least emotionally dependent on the continuation of a relationship holds the maximum amount of power and control within it. This is not about malicious manipulation. It is an objective systemic reality. When you are detached, you are no longer a beggar waiting for scraps of validation. You are an independent entity. This shifts the burden of seeking approval away from you and onto the other person. Think of a historical analogy found in the ancient philosophy of Epictetus and the early Stoics. They practiced what they called apatheia, a state of mind free from emotional disturbance caused by things outside one's control. A person who possessed apatheia could not be broken by the coldness of an emperor or the betrayal of a friend because their internal fortress was secure. In modern interactions, when you do not react with panic when someone pulls away, you demonstrate this stoic fortress. Imagine you send a message and hours pass without a reply. The attached mind spirals into cognitive distortion, sending follow-up texts, demanding explanations, and destroying its own dignity. The detached mind, however, notes the absence of a reply, closes the phone, and continues building its own empire. This refusal to participate in the anxious spiral signals an unshakable self-worth. The other person notices this lack of panic. They realize that their absence did not shatter you. They realize that you do not need them to feel complete. This realization acts as a psychological shockwave. Suddenly, they are forced to question their own position. They begin to wonder, why are they not losing sleep over me? And in that very question, the seed of their obsession is planted. Point 3, the psychology of scarcity and the value of limited access desire is not fueled by what is abundant. It is entirely sustained by what is out of reach. To truly comprehend why distance forces someone to value your presence, we must examine one of the most fundamental laws of human behavior, the scarcity principle, formulated extensively by behavioral psychologists like Robert Cialdini. This principle dictates that the human brain automatically assigns a premium value to any resource that is perceived as rare, fleeting, or difficult to obtain. When a resource is infinite, our cognitive processing filters it out as background noise, but the moment that resource becomes restricted, a psychological alarm triggers. We suddenly want it more, even if we never fully required it in the first place. This is not a modern social flaw. It is a hardwired evolutionary mechanism. In ancestral times, resources that were scarce required immediate expenditure of energy to secure. If a hunter-gatherer saw a rare fruit tree that was only accessible for a few days, their brain flooded their system with dopamine to drive them toward immediate action. Today, this exact same neurobiological mechanism governs our social structures. When you make yourself completely available, answering every phone call on the first ring, replying to messages within seconds, and dropping your own priorities the moment someone asks, you are committing social hyperinflation. You are flooding the market with your presence, and by doing so, you reduce your psychological value to zero. Let us examine a landmark psychological phenomenon known as the commodity theory, proposed by Timothy Brock. The theory states that any commodity will be valued more to the extent that it is perceived as unavailable. In relationships, your time and attention are the ultimate commodities. If you are a permanent fixture in someone else's schedule, they do not see your presence as a generous gift. They see it as a default setting. They stop putting effort into the interaction because there is no penalty for negligence. They know you will be there tomorrow, next week, and next month, waiting exactly where they left you. By strategically injecting space, you introduce the threat of loss. The human mind experiences what is known as loss aversion, a concept popularized by psychologists Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky. Loss aversion proves that the pain of losing something is psychologically twice as powerful as the pleasure of gaining it. The moment you pull back and make your time scarce, you activate this aversion in the other person's mind. They suddenly realize that your attention is a finite privilege, not a permanent right. They begin to feel the creeping anxiety of your potential absence. To alleviate this anxiety, their instinctual reaction is to step forward, exert effort, and actively chase you to secure what they are suddenly terrified of losing. Point 4, the autonomy frequency, building an unconducive empire. The most magnetic individual in any room is never the one trying to please everyone. It is the individual who is entirely consumed by their own purpose. This is the concept of radical autonomy. In a world plagued by codependency, where people desperately lease out their identities to gain transient likes, followers, or romantic validation, a human being who is genuinely self-contained acts as a profound psychological anomaly. This dynamic is perfectly illuminated by the self-determination theory developed by psychologists Edward Deckey and Richard Ryan. The theory asserts that human well-being and intrinsic motivation are anchored heavily in autonomy, the universal urge to be the causal agents of our own lives. When you possess low autonomy, you are constantly radiating an energetic need for rescue. You enter relationships hoping the other person will solve your boredom, cure your loneliness, or validate your existence. This instantly distorts the relationship into an asymmetrical prison. The other person feels your heavy emotional weight leaning against them, and their natural survival reflex is to pull away to avoid being collapsed upon. Now look at the historical execution of this concept through the lens of great creators and innovators. Consider figures who went into periods of absolute isolation to build their masterworks, completely indifferent to the social chatter around them. When you pivot your focus away from chasing another person and invest it entirely into your own personal empire, whether that is mastering a complex skill, building a business, or re-engineering your physical health, you shift your psychological frequency. You are no longer projecting a vacuum that needs to be filled. You are projecting a self-sustaining powerhouse. This autonomy completely redefines how others perceive you. When someone looks at you and realizes that you are genuinely happy in your own solitude, a profound cognitive shift occurs in their mind. They realize that they are not the center of your universe. Your life is an accelerating train, and they are merely a passenger who has been invited to watch the scenery. This removes the suffocating pressure of having to maintain your happiness. More importantly, it creates a powerful sense of intrigue. They see you growing, evolving, and thriving entirely without their input. The natural human ego cannot tolerate being irrelevant to someone they value. Your autonomy signals that your world is vast and exciting, and instead of feeling burdened, they become intensely eager to earn a designated seat inside your empire. Point 5, the chrono effect. Controlled communication velocity communication in the modern era has become instantaneous, and with that immediacy, we have lost the profound psychological weapon of anticipation. When every digital ping demands and receives an immediate response, human interaction loses its depth and degrades into a series of predictable, low-value reflexes. To weaponize distance, you must master what behavioral scientists call the chrono effect, the strategic manipulation of communication velocity to build intense psychological anticipation. This phenomenon is deeply rooted in the principles of operant conditioning, discovered by B.F. Skinner. In his classic behavioral experiments, Skinner discovered something extraordinary about motivation. Animals do not work hardest when they receive a reward every single time they press a lever. Instead, their motivation peaks to an obsessive degree when they are placed on a variable ratio schedule of reinforcement. This means the reward is not quang, unpredictable, and inconsistent. When a reward is guaranteed, the brain stops releasing dopamine. But when a reward is uncertain, the brain enters a state of hyperfocus, flooding the system with dopamine in anticipation of the potential payout. When you reply to a message instantly, you are placing the other person on a continuous reinforcement schedule. You become completely predictable. Their brain categorizes you as a solved puzzle, a safe asset that requires zero cognitive energy to maintain. However, when you deliberately slow down your response velocity, you shatter this predictability. By creating an artificial time delay, you force their mind to enter the gap of uncertainty. During this delay, a psychological process known as Zeigarnik effect takes place. Named after psychologist Bluma Zeigarnik, this principle states that the human brain remembers uncompleted or interrupted tasks much more vividly than completed ones. An unanswered message or an unconfirmed plan is an open loop in their subconscious. Because human cognition despises unresolved tension, their mind will continuously return to this open loop. They will pick up their phone, check your status, and wonder, why are they not replying? Are they busy? Are they with someone else? Did I say something wrong? This mental loop generates an intense emotional investment. By simply doing nothing and maintaining your silence, you have forced them to expend massive amounts of cognitive energy thinking about you. You have transformed yourself from a passing thought into a psychological preoccupation. Point 6. The privacy shield. The destruction of oversharing. We live in an era of digital exhibitionism. Social media has conditioned the masses to broadcast every granular detail of their existence, from what they ate for breakfast to their deepest emotional insecurities. People mistakenly believe that this total transparency makes them relatable and fosters connection. But in the ruthless calculus of human attraction, total transparency is the ultimate romance killer. When everything about you is public property, you eliminate the single most potent driver of human obsession: mystery. In psychological terms, when you reveal every facet of your life, you fall victim to the overexposure effect. Familiarity breeds contempt, or at the very least, boredom. If a person knows exactly what your day looks like, who your friends are, and what your exact opinions are on every topic, there is absolutely no incentive for them to ask questions. You have become an open book that has already been read from cover to cover. There is no subtext, no hidden depth, and therefore no desire to investigate further. To reverse this dynamic, you must deploy the privacy shield. This involves a deliberate retreat from the culture of oversharing, both digitally and in your face-to-face conversations. Think of this through the lens of cognitive psychology and the concept of ambiguity tolerance. Human beings are inherently uncomfortable with ambiguity, yet they are completely fascinated by it. When you share selectively, giving only a pristine, minimal glimpse into your world while keeping the rest hidden, you create a massive information asymmetry. Because their mind lacks the complete dataset to understand who you are, it is forced to rely on projection. They will use their own imagination to fill in the blanks of your life, and because human nature tends to romanticize the unknown, they will almost always project an idealized, high-value image onto your mystery. They will wonder about the books you are reading, the projects you are secretly executing, and the thoughts you choose not to share. You become an enigma, a complex maze with layers that must be peeled back slowly over time. In a world of loud, overexposed open books, the individual who remains a closed, elegant notebook becomes an irresistible magnet that everyone wants to unlock. Distance is not a malicious game of manipulation. It is the ultimate act of emotional sovereignty. When you step back, you are not trying to hurt the other person. You are simply refusing to participate in the slow devaluation of your own soul. You are reclaiming your time, your focus, and your unshakable self-worth from a world that treats availability as a cheap commodity. Remember, the goal is not to become a cold, distant ghost, but to become a self-contained empire so vast and compelling that your presence is earned, not given away for free. Stop chasing the shadow of validation. Step into your own light, pull back the tether, and let the universe feel the weight of your absence. If you have ever lost yourself by being too available for someone who treated you like an option, leave a comment below saying, "I am reclaiming my space." Let us know how shifting your focus back to your own empire changed the dynamic of your life. Subscribe to Shadow Psychology to unlock more hidden mechanics of the human mind, and we will see you in the next transmission.